What's up, folks? Missa B here as usual, and just want to take a few minutes to touch on some writing projects that I'm involved in. Talk about a couple of books that I've published, and invite you guys to, to support the effort. We want to be writing our own stories as Jamaicans, and I'm doing my part. In fact, having been around for a little bit, been through, independence, and we get to this point, figure it's always a good thing to take ownership of our own history by writing, as I said before, our stories. And so I have a couple of stories that I have written, and these are all available in novel format on the website at yaadmedia.com. See here, YAADD media.com. And just click on the link to books, and you're there. And the books are as follows. Sheila, the Girl from the Lane, is the additional title. And of course, there is the second book, Top Rankings. And then in the last couple of years, I have put out a sequel to Sheila, and this is titled Unbroken Sheila 2.0. And more recently, Scotch Bonnet Dreams, and the last one, excuse me, was The Men We Become. Now, these are all stories about Jamaica, about Jamaicans, and they are all stories that carry some lesson value in them. And essentially, that's one of the things that I try to do with my writing, is to use the opportunity to create motivational moments. And so I want to do a quick run through on some of the material and that have been written, and just to share that with you guys, so you know where you're getting. Now, again, the whole idea is taking ownership of our own culture. And so these stories are designed to inspire and to just to point the way. Let me since we have the Men We Become on the screen, we're going to talk about that quickly. And in fact, let me share a little snippet that was done. The Men We Become, which my son Nicholas created this as using the artificial intelligence.
He looked around his dim apartment, the crooked blinds, the cheap table, the thrift store sofa, and then at the pile of bills. Maybe, he thought, the problem was that he had stayed too long off board. He stood up abruptly, joints protesting, and went to the bedroom. From the bottom drawer of his dresser, under old T-shirts and a wool scarf he never wore, he pulled out a small metal cash box. He kept the key tucked inside his socks, old habits from years of tips and cash jobs. You never let your money sit where people expect it. He opened the box and stared at the contents. A neat stack of bills, mostly in denominations of 20s and 10s, some 5s. He had been saving this slowly, telling himself it was for a rainy day. Outside, New Jersey was rain, snow, and slush for half the year. Inside, he'd been in a storm of another kind for a decade. How much does a rainy day need? He asked the empty room. He began to count. The total was just enough to make the cruise possible, if he was careful, if he cut corners, and of course, if nothing unexpected happened. He closed the box and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the familiar tug of war inside him. One side was saying, be sensible, stay home, pay down the debt. Don't be stupid at your age. The other side, the quieter but stubborn part, responded, If you don't do something different now, when? When you turn 75. When is only doctor visit and funeral you traveling for? He thought of his children again. Michael, who spoke to him like a partner who had been disappointed too many times. Tanya, who was polite and distant in that way American-born children could be. Shanice, who still tried with him but whose patience was thinning. Maybe, he thought to himself, a man needed to step out of his ordinary life to see himself more clearly. Maybe if he could get his head right, he could start repairing the bridge between him and them. He went back to the table, sat down, and opened the email again. At the bottom, a big blue button said, "Book now." His finger hovered over it. His heart was thudding with an absurd mixture of fear and excitement. "Lord," he said softly, half a prayer, half a joke, "if this is a bad decision, please make the internet cut off right now." The Wi-Fi held. He clicked.
The Men We Become. That's just a little snippet from one of the chapters. And what's the story about? These are 4 Jamaican men who left Jamaica decades before, 20, 30 odd years before, 40 years. And so they are strangers, don't know each other because they live in different parts of the United States. And so life has carried them along. And, having come to America as, 19, 20-year-olds, they are now in their 60s. And a lot of what they had anticipated becoming, they have not, to a certain extent, realized that. One of them is a pharmacist, been years in the pharmaceutical studies, done well for himself, but his wife died, and his wife is dead some 2-3 years now, and he has not moved on. His children are worried about him, and they are trying to encourage him to go out, meet other people, get involved with some kind of activities, get a change of scenery. But he lives by himself in the house that he keeps as a shrine to his late wife. He has not moved anything out of the house from the day she died. And, his son is encouraging him, go on a cruise, take a cruise. And so he decides to think. In the same way how the little snippet you saw there, the gentleman is making a decision to go on this cruise because his kids are also encouraging him. Now, he has been married 3 times, and each marriage ends in divorce. So, married thing not going on too well with him. And so he decides that, he moves out. He lives in New Jersey in a 1-bedroom apartment, and not a pauper, but would have loved if life had treated him differently. But his kids are pressuring him. You need to change the scenery. Probably try again, meet somebody else, whatever. And so they too are encouraging him in New Jersey to go on a cruise, and hence him making the decision there with his little savings after being wiped out 3 times through 3 different marriages and divorce. And then there's the third person, Stuart, who lives in Florida, runs a garage, a auto mechanic shop, does pretty well as a mechanic, has 4 different kids with, 5 different kids with 4 different women, never married. And, at 66, he's now realizing this is, there must be something better, or something that he's not doing. And so one of his children's mother and her adult daughter, them encouraging him to go up on the cruise. And then the 4th guy is a chef, lives in Maryland, damn good chef. He works with fine restaurants. He's making good money. But again, his relationship skills is not that great, and so his wife has left him with her two kids who are now adults who have gone on to have children that he doesn't even know. And but his son is he has not spoken to his daughter in 5 years, and she now has two grandchildren for him that he has never met. And so, but his son every now and then is in with him. His co-workers at the restaurant, having been on these cruises, are encouraging him, and so he too thinks. And so all four converging from different parts of the United States, converging in Florida, in at the port of Miami, to join this cruise that is going from Florida to Nassau, and then down to Aruba, to St. Lucia, and final stop is Montego Bay. And so they all join this cruise, independent and unknown to each other. And over time, as the cruise set sail, they eventually start to run into each other and start talking. This is a story about just maturing, aging. It's a story about the as the title says, the men we become. It's a story about dealing with your life having gone off the rails a little bit, and getting back on track, about finding yourself. And so here are four men who don't know each other, sit down on a boat during the course of this cruise, and eventually they start to talk to each other, and then they start to share their stories. Four different stories that just really gets you going. And it's who is this? The target audience, everybody. This is a book you can share. It talks about men and our makeup outside of how we measure success. What exactly is success? It talks about friendships. It talks about relationships, and it basically is about four men who are not unprepared to talk about themselves, talk about their shortcomings, and basically come to terms with whatever those shortcomings are. Buy the book, yardmedia.com. Click on the book link, and this makes an excellent reading. 300 and on pages. Each stop we take you through the cruise, what happens on each stop, how they all their experiences, and how that helped to shape them, and more importantly, what happens to them after the cruise. Did these experiences impact them in any way, shape, or form? How so? Buy the book. And so, which takes me to the second book, which is Sheila, the Girl from the Lane, and its sequel, Unbroken. We want to talk about Unbroken, which is Sheila 2.0, because Sheila is a young girl who grew up in Waltham Park Road in the 1970s. So, that's the story begins there. She, refuses to listen to her mother's advice and strictures. Mother have six of them, and going to high school, fall in love with this like a young boy, muscular young boy, athletics, and Babsy Seco pregnant. And it happened one time, it happened two times. And of course, her mother kicked her out. She ultimately lands on her feet after she and the guy break up. The guy gets involved in some criminal activity and had to run away to the United States. And so, she finds herself partially, gets a good job, but runs into trouble at work, where she gets, she's the beneficiary of an unfair HR decision. So she ultimately took the company to court, won a nice settlement, and decides to plug that money in a little side business that she was running. But we build this character up in that part of the story so much because the story looked at some of the experiences of Jamaica in the 1970s, the political and the social and so on. And so Sheila 2.0 is Sheila now having gone out on her own to face the world. She's in the fashion business. She takes advantage of it's the late 1980s now. The dancehall is a big part of Jamaica. She runs a boutique, and so she invests in dancehall outfits and so on, and becomes a pretty solid entrepreneur. And so 2.0 is her raising her two kids by herself. Some dalliance with her children's father who comes back into the picture, but it shows what a strong, committed, resourceful, focused Jamaican woman can become. And so this story, it picks up some of the issues, the social issues, again, that is troubling Jamaica, crime and extortion, and the how the politics undermines the different aspects of the country, but how, as a young woman, a young businesswoman, how she deals with this. And of course, the story pretty fast moving. It takes her across the island from Kingston to Montego Bay, Portmore, and into New York City, where she is now looking to establish another aspect of business there. By the book, right? Again, some 330 pages. In fact, by the two books, Sheila and Sheila 2.0. So you get a full grasp of the story. And again, the books are available on the website at yardmedia.com, and just you click on the link and you're looking for the book section. The third novel that I want to, or the fourth novel, is Top Rankings. Now, Jamaica has always been plagued with gun crime problem for decades, and Top Rankings is a story that looks at the origin of this, how it metastasizes in that divisive period of the 1970s. It talks about the transition from the 60s into the 70s, Jamaica prior to independence, how independence brings, how our political culture changes the trajectory of the country. The story is actually told through two characters. One, which I modeled off this top superintendent, became a deputy commissioner, Trinity, and the other character was modeled off Copper, the famous criminal mind that come out of Rockford called Dennis Barr. In the story, the character is called Copper Shot. Here's a little snippet of that story.
They came to a stop at the northeastern end of the building, with its high ceiling and low slung windows. A smattering of ceiling fans purred lazily from the rafters, swirling the pungent air thick with antiseptic, medications, and rancid human flesh. There were 6 policemen dispersed at strategic positions throughout the ward to guard the prisoner, and the commandant greeted the acting corporal who sat by the bedside. "So, this is the man that all the excitement is about?" the commandant asked. It seemed more of a statement than a question. "Yes, sir," the acting corporal stated. Coppershot was clad in a hospital gown, his right shoulder and left leg heavily bandaged as he was being treated for 5 gunshot wounds, a memento of his brazen encounter with the police patrol that had intercepted them during their robbery attempt. Coppershot had shot and killed 3 of the policemen and was in the process shot multiple times. The police were bewildered that he had survived, and the broad bandage that covered the circumference of his head provided a clear sign that he was also beaten by the cops. The commandant looked at him for a while, but Gardner, standing a few feet behind the senior officer, studied Coppershot carefully. He noted his small stature and the lightness of his skin. Gardner drew himself closer until he was just a few feet from the bandaged head with the closed eyes that gave the impression of a man unconcerned and in a deep sleep. As Gardner bent over for a closer look, Coppershot slowly opened his eyes and peered back at the young trainee. Gardner felt a rush as the blood flooded his brain, and without realizing, he took a half of a step backwards, his gaze shifting, eyes searching for windows of the ward. Gardner swallowed hard in an effort to control his breathing, and he could feel the hop and skip beat of his heart as his blood pressure started to rise. Gardner was completely taken aback by his own reaction and by the dead, cold darkness of the prisoner's eyes, and he could not help but notice the swollen vein in Coppershot's neck, throbbing steadily as if it would burst at any moment. Slowly, he retreated from the ward. He would never forget the look of death that Coppershot gave him that afternoon.
All right, so top rankings. Gardner comes face to face with a man who will become his nemesis over the next couple of years. And as I said, we trace the story of badness. How did Copper turn to badness? The story speaks to that. It talked about Dongle, the clearing of Dongle to build what became known as Tivoli Gardens. It talks about what, Jamaica getting into independence. What was the political thinking at the time? What was the situation in terms of the social and domestic situation? And so, it looks at the formation of the different gang units throughout the corporate area, Kingston, and how that spread across the island. But more importantly, the story is centered around these two individuals and their collision course over time. A strong story, tough language, tough scenes. But if you really want to understand how we got into this violence, this is a story that was a product of a ton load of research, because I was actually writing a research document when I opted to go this direction with the story, with the material to tell this story. Again, you can pick this book up on the website at yardmedia.com, and of course you click on the link yardmedia.com books and you are there. Again, as I said, we try to tell the Jamaican stories from a lived perspective. Having grown up in Jamaica in that immediate post independence period, and so I am able to not from a third party perspective. I live these experiences, and so we bundle them together to tell these stories. Let me share a little synopsis from Sheila 2.0, as I have done earlier. I'm going to share two little synopsises. Here we go.
Sheila Salmon sat by the window of her Constant Spring Road office, overlooking the bustling mix of foot and vehicular traffic in the streets below. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the city that had been her home all her life. She traced the rim of her coffee cup with her finger, lost in thought. The decision before her was monumental: how to make the best use of the proceeds of the monetary settlement that she had received. By any stretch of the imagination, this was a huge amount of money, opening her third designer clothing store in a city where dreams were more often deferred than realized. Her thoughts wandered back to that fateful day at Outpost and Company Limited, where she had worked diligently for years. The internal legal issues for which she had almost no involvement had been presented as the reason for her dismissal. Her attorneys were able to put the pieces together and determined the real reason the company had found itself out on a slender limb and needed a scapegoat. And while the just $7.6 million settlement she had received after legal expenses was substantial, it had come at a high emotional cost.
There you go. So that little synopsis there from Sheila 2.0, which brings me to Scotch Bonnet Dreams. Now, again, as I said earlier, these stories are about us, ourselves, Jamaicans, the experiences that we have in terms of our development. And, you know, just to give you a little prips here, in the heart of Flatbush, Winston leaves Jamaica on a borrowed passport to chase a new life. A near fatal construction accident pushes him into the streets, where he survives the New York City winter with a mobile Jamaican soup hustle that soon becomes a neighborhood staple. But success comes with danger. From ruthless hustler Loxley to immigration threats and city code enforcers, Winston must fight for every inch of progress. From street soups to a bustling restaurant called Scotch Bonnet, this is a story of grit, culture, and the unbreakable Jamaican spirit. Scotch Bonnet Dreams is a novel about survival. It's a novel about ambition. It's a novel about betrayal and the dreams that we refuse to let go of. Winston Beckford is a youth from Denby, Clarendon. It's the 1990s. And as we're saying in Jamaica, not now go on too good for him. So he decides to buy, you know, try to reach a foreign. And in the process, you know, without giving too much away, he gets himself in a position where he purchases a passport from somebody who is deceased, but the passport have a visa. Again, it's 1990s, so this kind of scrutiny that we now go through in terms of passport control and so on never existed at that time. So on the basis of which he ends up in New York and using somebody else's name and identity. And so essentially we call it now identity theft, but it was never that fancy name back in the 1990s. Be that as it may, he is working in a construction environment, and here's a little snippet of that experience working in the construction sector, and we pick it up from
one morning, stepping out of the cramped East 91st Street apartment before dawn, the world slapped him, not metaphorically, but physically. The air wasn't just cool, it was a knife, a wet, icy blade that sliced through his thin denim jacket and work shirt like they were tissue paper. It stole his breath, searing his lungs. The wind, sharp and relentless off the unseen ocean, howled down the street, rattling garbage cans and tearing at his exposed face and ears. He gasped, instinctively hunching his shoulders, burying his chin in his collar. His teeth began to chatter uncontrollably. He'd known cold in Jamaica's Blue Mountains, a crisp dampness, but this was different. This was hostile, and with a force that was trying to peel his skin off his bones. Marcus shuffled towards the bus stop, his body rigid. Every step was an effort against the wind's push. The usual crowd huddled there wasn't just waiting. They were armored, puffy coats like inflated sleeping bags, thick scarves wound high over noses, knitted hats pulled low over ears, gloves that looked like they could handle molten steel. Marcus, in his thin jacket, worn jeans, and sight boots, felt like a fool, a shivering, exposed fool. The minutes until the bus arrived felt like hours. His fingers went numb inside his pockets. His ears burned, then went frighteningly cold. The dampness from his own panicked breath fogged uselessly near his face.
"This is how people die," a primal voice whispered in his head, frozen on a Brooklyn sidewalk while waiting for a bus. By the time the bus wheezed to a stop, Marcus was shaking violently. He stumbled on the blast of marginally warmer air inside, feeling like a piece of salvation, yet doing very little to penetrate the deep chill that had settled into his bones. He sat, huddled, trying to rub feeling back into his hands, aware of the pitying or amused glances from the bundled-up passengers. On sight, the cold was a different, with the beastly wind whipping across the open foundation pit with nothing to shield it. Handling cold steel rebar without gloves was agony. The metal sucked the heat from his hands instantly. His breath plumed in thick white clouds. His muscles, which were already stiff from the morning chill, protested every lift and bend. He moved slow.
All right, so that's a little synopsis from Scotch Bonnet Dreams, picking up where Winston gets a job on a construction site. He would, within weeks, get into a situation where he has an accident, fell off the building, and near-death experience, and he decides that that's enough for him with the construction thing. He's going to go back to something that he knows, and that is cooking. Because he used to cook when he was in Jamaica. He dance and keep down a Clarendon. Him borrow him mother big pot, them and him cook up some mannish water and some curry goat and rice. And out of the street side of sell. And people them rate him food. So them say, "Boy, I've never tried something with this." And so Scotch Bonnet Dreams, that's what it's about. It's about him always wanting to operate a restaurant. And so he uses this experience with the accident because he might have to send money back to Jamaica to his mother. His father dead and left his mother and himself and his sister. And so he becomes their only hope. And it's a story about Jamaica. We talk about deportation, which is a big topic right now. But more importantly, wrapped up in all of that is remittance. Remittance is a big part of Jamaica foreign exchange inflows. And so it examines all of that through the eyes and the experience of Winston Beckford. But it is also a story about taking your chances and trying to make the best use of that. It's a story about resilience, it's a story about survival, it's a story about ambition. It is a story about betrayal, but it's a story about having a dream that you refuse to let go. Scotch Bonnet Dreams, it's available on the site as well. Go and pick up your copy, yardmedia.com. And this is a nice little, 330 odd pages, 324 pages. And this story, well, all of the stories, all 5 books are page turners. Once you open and you start to read, you can't put them down. And so I am looking at, over the course of the next couple of months, to taking these books to the different cities, different parts of the cities, and doing some signings and so on. But for the time being, we're going to go and use the online thing. I encourage you, hit me up on the Yard Media website, or you can hit me up same place if you're on YouTube or on Facebook. Hit me up and we can get dispatched to you an autographed copy of any of the 5 books or all 5. And they are $16.90 a piece, just about $26 for inclusive of shipping. So let's support Jamaican literature. This weekend I will be at the Consul General's event right here in South Florida, the Jamaica Brew event, and we'll be reading as well from Scotch Bonnet Dreams and from The Men We Become, but all 5 books will be available for sale. So if you are in South Florida, hook me up, on Saturday, or again, check me out on the website. That's all we have for today, but let's keep the culture and the literature alive. Support Jamaican literature, support Scotch Bonnet Dreams, Sheila 2.0, and Sheila, and of course, there is The Men We Become, and finally, Top Rankings. Until we touch base with each other again, I mean, Missa B, more time.